What if I told you that your anxiety isn't who you are, but simply a memory your brain has memorized over time? What if every negative thought was just a program running that you had the power to change? See, most people wake up every day already anticipating stress. They check their phone, they remember yesterday, they feel the fear, and before they even step out of bed, their body is living in the past. Their future is already predictable. That cycle of thought creating emotion and emotion feeding more thought is the very pattern that wires anxiety into the brain. But here's the truth. You are not your thoughts. You are the thinker of them. And the moment you become aware of that, you begin to break the cycle. Anxiety is not something that just happens to us. It is a neurological and emotional pattern that has been wired into the brain through repetition. It is not who we are, it is who we've practiced being. Each time we worry about something, each time we anticipate the worst-case scenario, each time we dwell on past pain or fear, our brain records that experience. It wires together the thoughts and the emotions, and over time the body begins to remember. It doesn't take much, just a glance at your phone, a single thought about an upcoming event, or a memory triggered by a smell or a song, and suddenly the body shifts into survival. The heart races, the breath shortens, the stomach tightens, and we call that anxiety, not realizing it is the body reliving a state we've taught it to return to. This is not our fault. Most people learned anxiety at a young age, maybe from a chaotic home, maybe from witnessing trauma, maybe from being told to fear the unknown. And over time, the brain, this beautiful, powerful, adaptive organ, learns to memorize that state, because what you think and what you feel, when repeated often enough, becomes your state of being. The thoughts of, I'm not safe, or what if something goes wrong, when paired with the emotions of fear or worry, begin to form a loop. That loop becomes a program, and eventually we stop being the thinker of those thoughts and start being lived by them. You wake up in the morning, and before you even open your eyes, your body is already anticipating stress. You check your phone and see a message that reminds you of yesterday's problems. Your brain pulls from memory, your body fires up the same chemical signals, and now you're no longer in the present moment. You're living in a predictable future based on a familiar past. That's not freedom. That's a habit. And just like you learned it, you can unlearn it. The beauty of neuroplasticity is that the brain is always changing. It's malleable. And the same way you memorized anxiety through repetition, you can begin to rewire your mind toward peace, clarity, and presence through new choices. But first, you must recognize anxiety is not a life sentence. It's a signal, a message that the body has become addicted to the chemistry of stress. And like any addiction, it feeds off familiarity. It thrives when you do what you've always done. But the moment you become conscious of the pattern, when you catch yourself in the middle of that loop and decide, even for a moment, to do something different, you begin the process of transformation. The body will protest. It will beg for the familiar chemicals. It will try to pull you back into the loop. But if you stay with it, if you sit in that discomfort and make a new choice, the brain begins to prune away the old connections and build new ones. You are literally changing your biology with every new decision you make, not to react, not to repeat, but to observe and choose again. Your brain is a record of the past, but it can also be the map to your future. What most people don't realize is that the brain doesn't know the difference between what's happening out there in the external world and what you're vividly imagining within. That's not a metaphor, it's a biological reality. When you imagine an experience with enough clarity, detail, and emotion, the same neural networks fire in your brain as if the experience were actually occurring. The body, which is always eavesdropping on the mind, begins to chemically respond to that imagined experience, producing the very feelings associated with it. This is the hidden doorway. This is where transformation begins. Think about it. How many times have you thought about a worst-case scenario and felt your heart race, your chest tighten, your breath become shallow? That's your body responding to a thought. The event hasn't happened, yet your biology is shifted into stress because your mind made it real. Now, if you can feel anxiety from a thought that hasn't occurred, is it not also possible to feel peace, gratitude, and joy in exactly the same way? If the mind can create stress from nothing, it can also create healing, empowerment, and freedom from that same place. The key lies in what you rehearse in your inner world. When you close your eyes and begin to rehearse a new future, one where you are confident, calm, resilient, and centered, you begin to fire and wire new connections in your brain. You're building a new model of yourself. You're stepping beyond the familiar emotions of fear and lack, and you're teaching your brain and body what it feels like to live in a new emotional state before the experience ever shows up. This is the science of change. And the more you practice this inner reality, the more it becomes familiar, until one day, your body begins to believe it's already happened. That's the moment you've shifted from being a victim of your past to a creator of your future. You can't wait for your life to change to feel better. That's the old model. That's cause and effect. But the new model of transformation says when you feel better, your life begins to change. And this isn't positive thinking, it's biology. The elevated emotions you create, like gratitude, like inspiration, like wholeness, send signals to the body that a new future is unfolding. Your energy changes, your thoughts align with a new outcome, and you start attracting experiences that match that frequency, not by chasing them, but by becoming aligned with them internally first. This is why imagination is not just child's play, it's the rehearsal ground for personal evolution. When used intentionally, the mind becomes a tool to free you from the chains of your past. Each time you visualize a new version of yourself with clarity and conviction, you are casting a vote for that reality to become your future. And each time you show up to do it again, you reinforce that future as a possibility waiting to be chosen. You have the ability right now to biologically change your mind and body. This isn't a theory, it's science. And it begins with a single courageous decision to step away from the automatic self that has been running your life and begin to consciously rehearse a new one. Most people wake up in the morning and fall into the same predictable patterns. They think the same thoughts, feel the same emotions, perform the same actions, and then expect something to change, but nothing changes until you change. And true change doesn't start in the outer world. It begins in the brain. It begins when you stop living by memory and start living by vision. Mental rehearsal is more than wishful thinking. When you close your eyes and begin to mentally walk through a new version of yourself, seeing, feeling, acting as if you're already that person, you are literally rewiring your brain. Neurons that fire together, wire together. That means the more you practice being calm, confident, grateful, and empowered in your mind, the more you strengthen the neural circuits that support that new personality. Over time, your brain starts to look as if the change has already happened. And the body, which is the servant of the mind, begins to emotionally respond as if the future you've imagined is your present reality. Think about an athlete who visualizes crossing the finish line, or a musician who rehearses every note in their head. We know now from brain scans that when they mentally practice those moves with enough intention and clarity, the same areas of the brain light up as when they physically perform them. That's the power of mental rehearsal. It tells the brain that the future is already unfolding. And if the brain believes it, the body follows. This is why daily practice is essential. You're not trying to force change, you're becoming change. You're not waiting for life to give you the moment. You're creating the moment internally so that life has no choice but to match your new state of being. But it requires consistency. It requires showing up every day, not as the old self who's waiting to be saved, but as the new self who's already living the life they've imagined. When you sit in meditation and begin to disconnect from the outer world, when you pull your awareness away from your environment, your body, and time, you enter the realm of the subconscious. This is where the magic happens. This is where change is not only possible, it's predictable. As you tune into the emotions of your future self, peace, wholeness, gratitude, you are teaching your body what that future feels like. You're conditioning it ahead of the actual experience. And the more you condition the body to this elevated emotion, the more it starts to believe the future has already arrived. And this is not just about feeling better. This is biological. When you embrace elevated emotions, you begin to regulate your heart rhythm, strengthen your immune system, and release neurochemicals that support healing and regeneration. Your body is no longer in survival, it's in creation. You move out of the stress response, the state of fight or flight that so many people live in every day, and into a state of growth and repair. And your body begins to mirror your new mind. But here's where most people get stuck. They wait for their circumstances to change before they feel better. They think, once I get the job, then I'll feel confident. Once I heal, then I'll feel whole. Once someone loves me, then I'll feel worthy. But that's backwards. That's cause and effect. And transformation doesn't happen in that model. In the quantum model, you must become the cause. You must feel confident before the job appears. You must feel whole before the healing happens. You must feel worthy before love finds you. Because when your internal state matches the future you desire, you've aligned with the energy of that experience, and that's when you become magnetic to it. You can't just think your way into a new life. You have to feel your way into it. Thought is the language of the brain. Emotion is the language of the body. And when the two are in harmony, you begin to speak the language of change. You begin to broadcast a new electromagnetic signature into the field, and the universe responds, not to what you want, but to who you are being. This is why mental rehearsal is not a one-time event. It's a lifestyle. It's the daily commitment to no longer live as the unconscious program of yesterday. It's the decision to wake up every morning and remember who you truly are. Not the version shaped by fear, trauma, or limitation, but the one born of vision, love, and infinite potential. And every time you return to that version of yourself in your mind, you're pulling it closer into reality. You're no longer the victim of your history. You're the architect of your destiny. And your biology begins to align with that truth, one thought, one emotion, one intention at a time. There is a moment in your life, maybe it comes in the quiet, maybe in the chaos, when you become aware of a thought, just a simple moment of noticing, why am I thinking this way? Why do I always expect something to go wrong? Why do I keep repeating that same inner dialogue that tells me I'm not enough? That moment of awareness, that small flicker of consciousness, is the first crack in the armor of the old self. It is the moment the door opens, because the second you notice that you're thinking a thought rather than being the thought, you've stepped into the seat of the observer. And the moment you become the observer of your mind, you begin to reclaim your power. Most people spend their entire lives reacting to their environment, to their past, to their pain. They think they're choosing, but in truth they're running programs, deep emotional programs, built from years of experience, repetition, and memory. Someone says something critical, and you feel your heart close. Someone ignores your message, and suddenly you're spiraling. You get a bill in the mail, and the anxiety floods your chest. These are not conscious responses. These are automatic patterns, built from the past, playing on repeat in the present. And we don't realize it because we've identified with them. We say things like, that's just who I am, or I've always been this way. But that's not who you are, that's who you've practiced being. You see, the mind creates a narrative, and the body becomes its loyal servant. Over time, the emotions we feel most often, whether it's fear, guilt, shame, or anxiety, become our baseline, our emotional home. And once the body gets used to that chemistry, it begins to crave it. The body becomes addicted to the emotions of the past. It starts sending signals to the brain, urging you to think thoughts that will recreate that familiar emotional state. And just like that, you're caught in a feedback loop. The mind thinks a thought, the body feels the emotion signals the mind to think more of the same thought, and around you go. It becomes a closed circuit until you interrupt it. That interruption begins with awareness. It begins when you pause and say, I'm not my anxiety. I'm experiencing anxiety, but I am not it. You separate yourself from the state. You disidentify with the thought. And in that separation, you create space. Space is power, because in that space, you can choose differently. You can ask yourself, is this thought even true? Or is this feeling helping me become who I want to be? That kind of questioning isn't just psychological, it's neurological. It signals to your brain that a new pathway is available. You're no longer firing the same old circuits. You're weakening the ones that have kept you stuck. You're breaking the habit of being yourself. This is the work, learning to sit with discomfort without reacting to it, observing the mind without being pulled into its drama, noticing the urge to go back to the familiar, and choosing moment by moment to stay present, because presence is where change happens. The old self cannot survive in the present moment. It lives in the past and predicts the future, but it has no power in the now. And the more you return to now, the more that old personality begins to dissolve. But the process is not comfortable. In fact, the body will resist. It will crave the chemical cocktail it's used to. It will whisper, "This doesn't feel right," or "This isn't working," but that's just the old self trying to survive. And your job is not to believe those whispers. Your job is to witness them, breathe through them, and not act on them. Because every time you don't react, you're rewiring your brain. You're signaling to your nervous system that the past no longer has power over you. And eventually the old thoughts lose their charge. The emotions lose their grip, and you start to experience what true freedom feels like. That freedom isn't loud. It doesn't always show up in fireworks or breakthroughs. Sometimes it's subtle. It's the quiet moment when someone pushes your buttons, and you no longer feel the need to defend yourself. It's when you hear the old thought, but it no longer feels true. It's when the anxiety rises and you sit with it, breathe through it, and let it pass like a wave instead of getting pulled under. These moments are powerful. These moments are proof that you are changing, not because life forced you to, but because you chose to. And the more you practice being the observer, the more empowered you become. You begin to feel like you're no longer at the mercy of your thoughts, but in charge of them. You realize that you are not the voices in your head. You are the one listening to them. And that shift from identification to observation is everything. That's when you begin to create rather than react. That's when you stop living out the memories of the past and start inventing the possibilities of the future. In this work, there is no finish line. There is only the next moment, the next choice, the next opportunity to be conscious, to pause, to breathe, to remember who you really are. And the more you return to that identity, the one beyond the roles, beyond the trauma, beyond the story, the more natural it becomes. You're no longer playing the same mental movie on loop. You're writing a new script. You're feeling your way into a new version of you, one that is not defined by limitation or fear, but by awareness, intention, and choice. And as you continue to observe rather than react, your energy begins to shift. Your body relaxes. Your mind becomes clearer. You open the door to inspiration, to creativity, to insight, because you're no longer running from the past, you're creating from the present. That's when the miraculous becomes possible. That's when you become coherent. That's when your heart and brain begin to work in harmony. And in that harmony, life begins to reflect who you are being, not who you were. The world no longer mirrors your wounds, it mirrors your wholeness. And it all starts with that one moment. That first realization that you are not your thoughts, that you are not your feelings, that you are the one who sees them, that you are the awareness behind the experience. And that awareness is the gateway to liberation. Because once you know how to watch your mind without judgment, without fear, without needing to fix anything, just watch, it loses its control, it loses its identity, and you begin to step into something greater, something more powerful, something timeless. The real you. The you that has been waiting to be remembered all along. So ask yourself right now, who would I be without anxiety? How would I think? How would I breathe? How would I walk into a room? And then start being that person now. Because the moment you break the habit of being your old self, is the moment you step into the life you were meant to live.